Hello, this is Ray Marquiss with Valin Corporation. This short video is going to show how to change the IP address of an N-series PLC using Sysmac Studio so that you can communicate with it over Ethernet using your PC's Ethernet port. To start out with, let's talk about some network address terminology. This is just very basic terminology. I'm not going to get into it, say anything too advanced. The main thing is we all need to be using the same word. So IP address. The IP address is a unique set of numbers that identify all the Ethernet devices on the network. Let's talk about the format of the IP address. It's 4 sets of 3 numbers separated by a dot. Each of those sets of numbers, the 3 digits there, are called octets. So 192 is an octet, 168 is an octet, 250 is an octet, and 1 is an octet. So the IP address is made up of 4 octets. The network number on simple networks is the first 3 octets. So that 192, 168, 250 is the network number. The node number is the last octet. So the number 1 in the example IP address is the node number on the network. Once again, an example IP address 192.168.250.1. The network is 192.168.250. The node number is 1. In order for devices to communicate over Ethernet, the network part or the network number part of the IP address has to be the same. These are simple networks. There's exceptions to that, and you can get into more complex networks that will allow you to have larger node numbers or larger numbers of nodes. But we aren't going to talk about that now. The node number part of the address must be unique for each device. Let's look at a simple diagram that I've created. This is our starting network layout. And this is generally how it goes. The PC is set up to automatically receive an IP address when it logs onto a network, like at your work. When you connect your PC to the Ethernet port in the wall near your desk, it'll go out and ask the network server for an IP address that your company has set up. The PLC, when it comes out of the box, is by default 192.168.250.1. Most Omron Ethernet devices start out with that IP address. Not all of them, but almost all the PLCs do. Let's look at what the desired network layout is going to be. For the PC, we want to change the IP address to 172.21.90.101. The PLC, we want to have 172.21.90.1. These numbers could be different for your application. You can make them whatever you want as long as they stick to within the rules of creating IP addresses for network devices, which we aren't going to go over in this presentation. If you add another network device, it also has to be on the same network, but has to have a different node number. For example, I've added an Ethernet IP coupler device up on the top there, and we would make its IP address have the first 3 octets the same as our PC and our PLC. And then the last octet would be a different number. So in this case, 172.21.90.100. The steps to change the PLC IP address are listed here. The first one is to change the PC to a node number on the Omron default IP network, which is 192.168.250. An example of that would be 192.168.250.100. I'm not going to go into that in this video. I cover changing the IP address of a PC in another video. The link is in the comments. Next, we're going to open Sysmac Studio and change the communication settings to 192.168.250.1. That's the default IP address for an Omron PLC. If you know that the IP address of the PLC you're trying to communicate with is different than that, then you would change the settings in Sysmac Studio to use the IP address that you know. After you've changed the IP address in the communication settings, there's a test button. We'll see that. We're going to test the connection. Next, we're going to go in and change the built-in Ethernet IP port settings in Sysmac Studio configuration to give the PLC the IP address you want. For example, we would change that to 172.21.90.1. This is confusing because I'm telling you to use 2 different IP addresses, but we need to be able to communicate with the PLC first before we can change the IP address to an address that we want. We'll connect with Sysmac Studio and synchronize the project. Now we've synchronized the project and changed the IP address of the PLC Ethernet port to the 172.21.90.1. We're going to change the PC back to a node number on the new network, which is 172.21.90, and perhaps node number 100 would work. Next, we'll change the communication settings in Sysmac Studio to use the same network, 172.21.90, and we'll use node number 1. You'll test the connection again in Sysmac Studio, and then you'll be done. I'm going to skip the step where I change the PC IP address because I've got another video that you can watch to show how to change that if you don't know how to do it already. The link for that is in the transcript of the video below. Once we start Sysmac Studio and you've got a project open, which I've done here already, if you click on the controller menu, select Communication Setup, and then set the IP address to the 192.168.250.1. That is the default IP address of the PLC. If your PLC doesn't have the default IP address set, it's been changed already. There's another video, and the links once again are in the transcript of the video here below. There's another video that shows how to go out and find what the IP address is on your network using a tool that Omron installs with Sysmac Studio. So next we'll do Ethernet communication test. We can communicate to the PLC using this IP address temporarily, but that's not the IP address that we want to have for our application. So I'm going to change it. First, I'll click OK. In the configuration menu on the left, if you scroll down, you may have to open some of these or expand some of these headings. For instance, by default, it normally looks like this. It's under the controller setup, and then built-in Ethernet IP port settings. Double-clicking on that will bring open this window where I can change the IP address. So I'll change it to the desired target network, 172.21.90, and I'm going to leave the last one at 1. Notice that what I did was I edited each octet individually. This isn't like Windows where I can just type in all of the octets at once. And also as a reminder, what I've done here is I've changed the configuration of the PLC so that when I download this project, it will actually change the Ethernet IP address of the Ethernet port on the PLC. I go over this over and over again because people get confused. The other setting that we changed was for the software, telling the software how I want to communicate with the PLC. So right now the port is set at this 192.168.250 address, but I want it to be 172.21.90 address. I'll communicate with the PLC by going online. I can click on this online button here, or I can go to the controller menu and work online. There's a short delay. Once I'm online, you'll see some changes. Most noticeably is this bar, this orange bar here. Now that I'm online, I can synchronize by clicking the synchronize button, and I'll select to transfer to controller. Once I'm done synchronizing, a window will pop up showing that the synchronization completed successfully. You have to look at it in this box, this information box right here at near the bottom of the window. I'm okay, I can close that. It still looks like I'm online, but eventually I'll drop off and won't be able to communicate anymore because my PC is not set correctly. The next step is to go offline, then go to the controller menu, go to communication setup, change this to 172.21.90.1. And now I'm telling it to communicate to the PLC using the new address that I set in the configuration and transferred to the PLC. However, I'm not going to be able to do that yet because I haven't changed the IP address back on my PC. So an Ethernet communication test is going to fail. A communication has occurred. I need to go back and change the IP address of my PC to the 172.21.90 and then a unique node number, and then I'll be able to continue. That's all there is to it. If you have any questions, you can contact us using the information on the screen.